All right, welcome to a very somber edition of the Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast. I'm Scott R. Kaufman. This is Stephen Attewell, and
Hey,
today we will be talking about the Rains of Castamere. About probably half of you who were viewing this podcast before have given up on the show at this point, or so we've been led to believe by many critics because of the Red Wedding. We have a lot to talk about, obviously. I don't know quite where we should get started. I know everyone wants to just jump right into the Red Wedding, but there's some other things earlier in the episode that I think we should talk about even before we get there. And I personally, because we're going to go back and forth in and out of the wedding, I think it might be best to just begin with something that Stephen was talking about a few weeks ago, which is the relationship of host and guest.
yeah,
Because they, around 616, there is a concerted effort to talk or to show all of the major characters with the bread and the salt.
yeah.
And it begins with a close-up on the bread and the salt, so much so that I couldn't even tell what it was. I was wondering if it was like escargot, but that seemed sort of out of place. And then, it kind of dawned on me, oh, yes, this must be bread and salt. And one of the interesting things is I had to watch it about 9 times before I saw Catelyn take the bread.
Mm-hmm.
She does not appear to take the bread, which might be significant given some of the alterations that happen later on. But
the
why don't we
key thing is that the king and his queen definitely eat the bread and the salt that is offered. And,
Yes.
and as importantly, that Walder formally gives it, which is slightly different from the books. In the books, Catelyn is very insistent that Robb ask for it first thing.
Yeah.
Even though it might be seen as a bit rude because it's understood culturally as a suggestion that you don't trust your host. But Walder, in the books, once he's asked, he has to give. But here, he formally sort of sets it out. Not only does he have it ready for them, but he then says, I bring you under my protection. And that is a very common element of all Westerosi customs. I mean, we'll see later in the wedding ceremony, the cloaking of the bride by the groom is supposed to be about protection. Which is why when Tyrion couldn't put Sansa's cloak on her, that had a symbolic significance as well as a personal significance.
And the comparison between this wedding and Tyrion's is going to be useful, and we'll discuss it a little later on, and I'll have a post about it.
Mm-hmm.
I promise not too many laser beams, because they're not necessary. Because of this sort of openness on the part of the phrase, all of the sort of intrigue and subterfuge that defined Tyrion's wedding, everyone looking across the table at everyone else and not really speaking, versus this very open wedding.
And
visually.
the other thing I noticed is that, the Tyrion's wedding has kind of, the tables are set in a very strict kind of C shape.
Yes.
With empty space in the middle. And this is more like straight lines and then the main table, so that there's a kind of a more democratic atmosphere. It's, we're all equal as guests, with the exception of the bride and groom, who are obviously the happy couple and should be the center of attention.
Honestly, it looked more like a church and
like
pews.
Yeah. I mean, that's.
I just don't normally associate the church with democratic.
Weddings?
No, with democratic. Yes. With weddings,
yeah,
obviously.
but it's supposed to indicate community and oneness, and initially it actually has that feeling. I mean, if you compare the initial awkwardness of the Tyrion Sansa wedding to the kind of seemingly more genuine frivolity and happiness, they're very good about suckering you in. And I've read the books 5 times. I knew damn well what was going to happen in this episode. And it still kind of gets you. It still has that quality that the best tragedies do of tricking you into thinking that maybe this time things will be different. Maybe this time everything won't go horribly, horribly wrong.
And this is a very common theme, and I don't want to reduce everything to comic books, but the Warren Ellis's planetary Batman crossover, Night on Earth, is very good about reconstructing the scene of Wayne's initial trauma, and that kind of goes again and again. You notice every time they reboot the Batman franchise, his parents have to die again. He always has to have dead parents, and in this comic, he's actually he wonders what would happen had his parents not died, how he could have stopped it, and maybe this time he will. He can do it this time. But there's the inevitability. I mean, the character doesn't work. The plot falls apart. I mean, if you go back to the early issues of Batman or of Detective Comics, one of the really interesting things is that he doesn't actually have dead parents for about 33 issues. It takes about 4 years for them to kill his parents. Initially, he's just a wealthy man who dresses up in a bat suit and beats up poor people. And this was a popular narrative.
He was killing them back then. He carried a gun, right?
Well, he carried a gun. He threw them into vats of acid. But the thing is that this was popular among poor people. And it's sort of strange that poor people wanted to read about a wealthy socialite who spent his nights running around, jumping off of buildings, and killing them. And it's sort of...
Sure, I mean, in the sense that, Santa Claus is giving out presents, it's a fantasy in the sense that, if I actually had the resources that I'd need to do something...
I would kill people like me. It's a very weird fantasy.
But the people who are like you are also the people who do the most hurt,
But I guess my point is simply that the character, as we know it today, didn't work
absolutely. Yeah.
without the tragic origins. And I think, as we discuss this episode, we'll realize that Game of Thrones really doesn't work without the tragedy. It doesn't work without Ned Stark dying. It doesn't work without Robb Stark dying. I mean, it's essential.
And that's what I'd just like to say to anyone who is considering, cutting off their subscription to HBO, not watching the show anymore. The people who are old-time book readers have experienced this moment. It's almost
universal. We've been waiting for 13 years. I mean...
Yeah, well, it's not just that, but it's whenever anybody came to that chapter, the frequency with which the words, "I threw the book against the wall," come up are almost universal. Everyone has that moment of denial and sort of abjuration that we're almost trying to, make it not happen and declare it that it didn't have to happen. It shouldn't be this way because we sense a certain an inversion of the natural order, of the order of fiction, basically. The rules of fiction are being broken here. Campbell, would be furious at this point. But it has to happen for everything else that has to happen. I read a review that made me very angry where someone said this was unnecessary and senseless. And this is very necessary, and there is a deep sense to this. This will have the same impact that Ned's death will have in creating the dramatic arc of the rest of the series.
Yeah, and I think the article that annoyed me the most was, I guess, Joe Concha's at Mediaite, where he wrote about divorcing HBO Sunday's brutal Game of Thrones goes way too far. But he gives two rules that should never happen on a television show. Never kill a dog and never stab a pregnant woman. And
well, they already killed a dog before, so that should have been a warning.
And he actually mentions that and says it was bad enough then, this was worse. But that's sort of arbitrary, outside of the logic of the show. That's people saying, these are the things that I do or don't want to see. These are the things I do or don't find acceptable in my daily life. So someone who's pro-life is going to be very upset by what happens in this episode. And, someone who's pro-animal rights is going to be very upset by what happens in this episode. But when the whole point of it, rhetorically, is that you be very upset, that this is supposed to be disturbing. This is a breach of the guest-host relation on a massive scale.
Of nature. It's a breach of the sacred laws that are supposed to, bind the universe together. And there's also, I've always found something rather creepy about those exceptions, which is we will watch human beings mutilated, torn apart, murdered, massacred, etc. But for God's sakes, don't hurt a dog. We will, how many times does Bambi's mother die? But God forbid that you show, a pregnant mother dying. What this is about is attempting to evoke horror. And if you feel horror, then congratulations. You are a fully paid up member of the human race.
Yeah,
this wouldn't be a half-bad test for sociopathy. If you can sit through the Red Wedding and feel perfectly happy, then there's something in your brain not working.
Yeah. I mean, it's... oh, man. I'm trying to remember the... what's the name of the photographer? Nick Ut, or Nick Ut. I don't know how to pronounce his name. But he took that photograph of the young girl in the Vietnam War, and she's covered in napalm, and she's naked. She's running towards him, and people objected to that image because it captured so frighteningly exactly what was wrong with the kind of campaign we were running in Vietnam. And I as you said, if you can look at that photo and not feel offended, not feel moved, then there's something wrong with you. And to say that the Red Wedding is an outrage, and you're going to cancel HBO, and you're giving up on Game of Thrones because you've essentially been shown that you're a human being capable of empathy, capable of... I fundamentally don't understand that impulse, that there's a certain, as you said, that there's a certain level of brutality we'll accept. And then after that, we need to just shove the rest of it onto, Discovery Investigation Channel. Yeah. The murder shows they show at 2 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it gets to is the way in which tragedy has been kind of banished as an art form from a lot of popular culture, which is...
Absolutely.
We show action movies, we show dramas, we show horror movies and thrillers, but we don't show tragedies. And tragedies, as I say in this thing that I put up on Tumblr, tragedies have a purpose. They are meant to evoke empathy and to kind of stretch that muscle of empathy in the human soul. In
order to make you a better citizen, if we're going to go back to the classical
Aristotelian
definition, it's what makes you capable of
living in a city and
governance.
Not killing everyone around you. Yeah,
exactly. And it's vitally lacking. And I know that what people are going to say is that no, what they have isn't empathy. They don't lack empathy. They have a surfeit of empathy, and that it's just too much. It's the wife and the husband and the king and the mother and the dog, and it's overwhelming. But to be honest, in the same way that the nudity has been gauged to overwhelm you, to be just on this side of pornography as a way to make you uncomfortable with what you're seeing. So when Littlefinger gives speeches in front of prostitutes having sex with each other, the whole point is for you to be uncomfortable, because television at this moment is much too much about making you fine with everything. I mean, if you think about the average episode of, I think your Roomba is acting up. Could you hear that? No? Okay. I heard what sounded like a Roomba, and I know it's not mine.
I think it may be my laptop fan. Is it too loud?
Okay. It's fine now. I was just confused. But anyway, people's normal association, and I think the benchmark for this kind of what would otherwise be considered exploitative television would be something like Law and Order SVU, in which every week something new and horrible is done to a child.
But in just tasteful enough a way that it doesn't bother you so much that you want to look away. Exactly.
It doesn't persuade people to set up hidden cameras and tape their friends who haven't read the book watching, this episode. And to be honest, I understand that people think it's excessive, and we'll get to the exact nature of the excessiveness in a minute. But before we get to that, before we actually talk about how this may have gone over the top, and people have compared it, this is literally the Fonz jumping the shark, although that doesn't make any sense literally, because people have lost what the word literally means.
And what the phrase jumping the shark is supposed to refer to.
Exactly. And this reminds me of well, I came up with two examples. Stephen came up with one. My two were the season 3 finale of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, in which the mayor becomes a giant snake, and he kills off a number of minor characters. But that's a season finale, and those characters were not following the main characters to college. So there was a sort of natural closure to it. The other thing was a series finale of Twin Peaks, in which, if I remember correctly, David Lynch just blew everything up because he was annoyed at the network for moving the show around, putting it on Saturday night, and so he just decided, fine, if it has to end, I'll just blow it all up. Stephen mentioned that Oz, as a series finale, ends the same way. I admit I never made it all the way through Oz. I'm ashamed, but the thing I'll say is this isn't a series finale. At the end of this episode, after that desolate silence that we got for 3.5 minutes as the credits ran, we got on the next Game of Thrones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But why don't we jump back and okay, talk about before we get to the more tragic tragedy. Yeah, let's talk about the minor tragedy of Bran and Rincon
and really quickly, just sort of touching point to notice these things happen. Sam and Gilly are going to the Night Fort, and they're going to get through the wall through the Black Gate. That's important to keep in mind in the future. And Dario, Jorah, and Grey Worm capture the city of Yunkai.
Yeah, single-handedly, apparently.
Single-handedly, which I thought didn't really make a whole lot of sense.
No.
And Jorah is very sad that Denny is interested in another boy. So that kind of clears that up quickly.
Poor Jorah. I hope he doesn't betray her. Anyway, so there is another scene where Jon and a group of wildlings have run off a horse farmer. Horse farmer? I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you call someone?
Horse
farmer. Horse breeder of horses. The person who wrote the dissertation on Darwin should actually probably know the exact term for that. Me. So they run him off. They catch up with him. And
specifically, they run him off because Jon gives him advance warning.
Yes.
Which, should kind of drain the drama out of what's about to happen, but doesn't, which I thought was kind of well done.
No, I think it was well done because we assumed that he would get away, and this was another noble act by a Stark or half Stark, and that came to no fruition because they do catch up with him right outside of the what looks like a Martello Tower from Joyce's Ulysses, but a tower or one of Yeats's towers.
Yeah, it's supposed very to be this former town called Queen's Crown, which is it's not quite the way it was in the books. In the books, there's this lake and the tower is standing in the middle of the lake, and there's a causeway that's just there for about an hour a day. And if you don't know where it is, you're gonna drown trying to get to the tower.
Which is a much more interesting image in terms of protection, but this is a very normal kind of tower that you find in any sort of English, Irish, or Scottish area that had been raided by Vikings. The high window, the entry that could be blocked at the bottom, and the high living levels. That way, you could, right, and you make it entirely out of stone, so it can't be burnt. But the thing is that it's also. Yeah, well, but it's not really a watchtower. It is actually it's something you run to. It's because the Vikings will move on. They prefer easy prey, and when Hodor starts hodering, and it's weird that I
love the fact that Bran, they actually we get the gerund.
Yeah, Bran actually says stop hodering. It's the first missed connection that we see, and Stephen and I sought valiantly to find the Aristotelian term for the misconnection, because I know it exists, because I've read my Paul Damon, and I remember it existing, but I could not find it in my Paul Damon, or elsewhere on the internet. But there is this notion attached to tragedy of the missed connection, and this is the first one we have in the episode. And I should let Stephen talk about this a little, because
sure, and the moment is kind of interesting in that Bran sees Jon through Warging. He's finally able to consciously do this in a moment of desperation and panic and fear. He sees his brother, but his brother cannot see him, which is interesting. I mean, we'll see how they go with Jon and Bran's kind of connection at a distance in the future. But Bran saves his brother. He's able to do something that few Starks have been able to do. He saves one of his family members.
And I do have one question about that. Yeah. Shouldn't there have been 3 direwolves out there? Why were there only 2?
So both in the book and the show, Jon is not with Ghost at this moment, because a direwolf cannot climb a 700-foot wall.
It just needs to try harder. Anyway, okay.
But it's Shaggy Dog and Rickon.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, it doesn't look like in the show that Jon particularly noticed what happened. That he was a little bit too focused on killing Orell. But, it's also interesting because in a similarly Stark-like moment, Jon makes a decision that he's not going to kill this man. And Ygritte does this interesting thing where, for her, killing this man is her once again covering for Jon. But it backfires. And when Jon shoves her to the ground, it's almost like he's trying to save her in a sense of, don't go against the wildlings. Don't, because you can't come with me. And she doesn't quite get that until she watches him right away in this amazing angered look on her face. Success or failure, yeah, he doesn't save the guy. But at the same time, he doesn't kill him, which would have been a true violation of his oath. And he's now going to do what he swore he would do. He's going to warn the Night's Watch that the wildlings are coming. He kills Orell in a kind of... Actually, I like the line about "you were right all along." There's a kind of a nastiness to that I appreciate.
Well, and it also harkens back to Littlefinger saying, "I told you not to trust me."
Yeah. And he gets scratched up in the face, so he's not so pretty anymore. But the interesting moment is actually... I mean, there's a big difference in the book and the show. When Bran wargs into Hodor, in the books, that is seen as an immoral action. that he is committing the spiritual, psychological equivalent of rape. He is going into someone's mind against their will. They are frightened, traumatized, and it is one of the sort of rules of warging, to the extent that they exist, that you're not supposed to warg into a human, and
well, but
you're not supposed
that's
to...
one of those rules of the impossible, right?
Yeah.
Because they set it up as no one else can do that, so it's a
that's
rule.
not the case in the books.
Yeah.
In the books, you can actually... You have to be extremely powerful in order to do that, because human beings fight back if you try and warg into them. And it's something that Bran sees as shameful. He hides it. He doesn't want to let people know that he can ride Hodor in another sense. But here it's presented as his specialness. This sets him apart and above all other supernatural people in the North.
I'll have to look at that scene again. I don't think that Bran did it on purpose. I think
he didn't. And
okay, so I don't think he knew he was capable
do it consciously.
Of it. Yeah.
But at the same time, it is still shown as a spiritual violation.
Oh no, I agree with that. It's just it's at this point, he was as afraid as Hodor was, and reached out in the only way he knew how. It reminds me a lot of I don't know if you've read Octavia Butler's Pattern Master novels, but in the earliest one, it's this sort of psychic warfare is explicitly seen as people reaching new plateaus in their ability by means of trauma. And this seemed to me very much in line with that at this moment, Bran was afraid enough to do something that he would otherwise not do to someone that he does dearly love. And
he did it out of total necessity, that if Hodor didn't shut up right then and there, they were all going to die. And he didn't know what he was doing. But
and it's something my wife and I were talking about. Would they have died? I mean, if Hodor didn't shut up, their location would be revealed. But if their location was revealed by someone yelling Hodor, that, I mean, as caught up as Jon Snow was in the battle, the revelation that there was someone in the tower yelling Hodor.
Oh, they're still going to... The wildlings would still go up and attack, yeah. I mean, if they're paranoid enough that they're not going to sneak up and just steal 8 horses, but kill a man, to make sure that he can't report their presence, they're definitely going to kill someone up in a watchtower.
If they can get to them.
There's no question of that.
It's just, I wonder how things might have gone differently if Jon had heard the Hodoring.
Well, I mean,
recognized
the main question is, if Tormund Giantsbane had heard the Hodoring, or if he'd believed Orell, very different story.
So this is our first misconnection. We have Jon Snow and his brothers within, let's say, 100 yards of each other.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that, there is this misconnection, these ships passing in the night, and the effect of the Starks coming closer together is not to form a new family, unit. It's to split them further apart. That after this, the boys have to split, and this bond between the suddenly verbal Rickon and his brother is severed potentially forever. That he's off to learn how to walk in darkness.
And it's something that's going to come up again in terms of the pathos of Kat's end and why she does what she does, and believing that once Robb is gone, she is the last of her family. But they all eventually have to come to believe that they are the last remaining Stark, and this is a sort of terrible thing. So we should get to the next misconnection, which is obviously Arya arriving late to the wedding.
Oh, and the way that they set up the heartbreak with the line from the Hound where he says, it's not the twins aren't going to go away if you take your eyes off them. It's like the writers are speaking directly to the audience and saying, don't worry, this is going to happen, right before they say, this isn't happening.
Yeah, and this is one of those episodes where the distinction between the audience, the original audience, those who've read the books, and the audience who've only seen the series is really well defined, because a lot of the lines that resonate are aimed at readers, and there's no misdirection. And I had been anticipating all season that as we approached this event, we would get misdirection. They would have us.
No, they went the opposite.
They went the opposite way, and they once the wedding starts, we have Arya arriving on scene with salt pork. We have
them
a
getting
very
turned away.
Yeah, we have a very happy, joyous wedding going on, and the best way that I can describe the episode is that it's very much like a bad magician, and what I mean by that is that David Nutter, the director, he does this absolutely on purpose. And if you're not familiar with David Nutter, he's done a lot of things, but some of the best stuff he's done, ironically, was with the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which of course stars Cersei. But he and the reason I bring that up is because the Terminator, Sarah Connor Chronicles, everyone already knows what happens. Like they gave this episode to a director who's experienced at creating tension where none should be. Everyone knows John Connors. Yeah. He is the savior of humanity. He will. Yeah. So there should be no tension with. But
that's the proof of good tragedy, which is, everyone knows this. Well, yeah, everyone knows the story of Oedipus. Romeo and Juliet starts with the narrator telling you exactly what is going to happen throughout the whole of the play, but getting you to care anyway is the artistic challenge.
Yeah, and I don't think it's as much of a challenge as you think. I think and this is why I think a lot of the reactions to the episode are in fact disingenuous, because of course we don't want it to happen, and of course we see it coming. David Nutter is actually doing the bad magician, nothing up my left sleeve, nothing up my right sleeve, and you know that there's going to be a pigeon or a fucking long thing of robes coming out of one of the sleeves. You know that the setup, right? You recognize that you are being set up, and especially when you compare it to the Tyrion's wedding, where there's no establishing shot to open up. You're very confused as to how people are relating to each other. Here, you open up with the passing of the bread, and then we get this establishing shot that says, all right, this is where everyone is. And then it cuts to a shot of the musicians playing in the balcony. This is where they are. It
really does show you where everyone's sitting.
Exactly. And I don't mean to keep bringing up Batman, but it's the same thing Christopher Nolan does in The Dark Knight. In the scene where the Joker takes the party hostage, and he puts his knife up to her neck. He starts telling her the story of how he got the scars. The camera does these figure eights around him, right? And Nolan directs the camera to these figure eights around the both of them. And I'll link to the post where I read about this. But the whole point of those figure eights is to show you that there's nothing behind him, there's nothing behind her, and now there's nothing behind him, and there's nothing behind her, and there's nothing behind him, and there's nothing behind her. And then all of a sudden Batman appears. This is very much in the same vein, that we want to show you that there's absolutely nothing wrong. Nothing is untoward here. And we have these establishing shots. We go to close-ups, re-establishing shots, re-establishing shots. And you at a certain point, even if you're not familiar, even if you hadn't read the books, you should start, especially given Tyrion's wedding and how cynical and mistrustful the direction, McLaren's direction of that was. You should know that if you're getting this information this straightforwardly, that
something's up.
Yes, there's something lurking in the corner. That the musicians aren't musicians.
Although that was an interesting thing they chose not to do, and I get why they chose not to do it. In the book, the musicians are supposed to be terrible because they're not actually musicians; they're crossbowmen.
Yeah.
And I think for the sake of wanting the audience to buy into the kind of initial happy kind of dancing moment where everyone's laughing and the betting happens, and then for everyone to recognize the Rains of Castamere when it starts playing, you need good musicians. If the drummer from Coldplay can be considered a good musician.
Was that the drummer from Coldplay?
That was the drummer from Coldplay.
Wow, I did not realize that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and actually, as opposed as I'm supposed to be on principle to Coldplay, I must admit I do like the percussion. But then again, I'm deaf, so in almost everything I like the percussion.
So one kind of like really random note, the whole. I mean, given that Arrested Development just came out.
Oh God!
Have you been to the Tumblr Arrested Westeros?
Yes, I have.
Okay, Robb Stark straight up says, "I've made a terrible mistake."
Yeah.
I was like, is that supposed to be a deliberate nod? Are they fucking with us that much?
I don't think it's supposed to be deliberate, but yeah. We actually just finished it, Arrested Development last night, the new season, and
I haven't. Don't tell me.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, but fuck you. I will tell you. There's a wedding and everyone dies. Only George Michael survives, but that's only because he's really Scott Pilgrim. Yeah, there's to kind of return back to the idea of what's going on. There are a couple of critical moments after the bread and salt in the wedding, and the one is we were talking earlier about one in Greek words. Anagoresis is a Greek word, and it means the moment where a character realizes something. And usually it's a moment when the character realizes something, that there's been dramatic irony already, that the audience has already realized that something is amiss. And the direction of this episode should have led the audience to believe there was something amiss. But it's when Kat sees them close the doors. And
and hears the music change.
But it's even before she hears the music change. Her eyes follow the fray, and I can't tell which one because they're all wearing the same stupid hats.
I believe it is. It's supposed to be Lame Lothar Frey, but I believe it is actually Black Walder Frey. And even though those sound like nameless flunkies to most of the audience at the moment, keep them in mind. They will become important.
Okay. Well, I need to think about why that is. But my point is when Catelyn sees him go for the doors, it's even before he closes the doors that the camera had already zoomed in on her, reversed to where we get the back of her head, and we're seeing sort of over her shoulder her perspective, watching him close the door, and then she just slightly turns her head.
Yeah, as the music.
And the music doesn't change yet. That's still a couple of seconds away.
Okay, all right. You're better at this than me, so
right. It's right before the music starts. She realizes what's happening before anyone else does. Well, of course, Frey knows, but
he's not realizing he knows.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know, but she's realizing what we already know, and it's this haunting moment. And when she kind of understands that she's let her guard down in an intemperate manner, and that there are consequences that are going to be paid for this. And one thing I will try to insert into this video, and if not, I will put into the post that follows, is we know that Catelyn and Arya are not supposed to look alike. That Arya is supposed to resemble Ned.
Eddard, yeah.
Yeah. And at this point in the episode, I don't know what they did to Catelyn, to the actress, Michelle Fairley?
Michelle Fairley,
yeah.
Yep.
I don't know what they did to her, but from this moment on in the episode, her face is wider. Her eyes are thinner. Her lips are thinner. And
you're saying,
she looks more like Arya than she has possibly ever.
Interesting.
And in fact, let me see if I can't bring this up. I can do it post-production, but that's much more difficult. So let me see if I can't do this way. Screen share. Let us look at this.
Okay.
Are you seeing that?
I can see many photos. I cannot
okay,
yet see just the one.
Okay, well, let me try, okay, so there's Arya, right?
Okay, yeah.
All right, so look
Gotcha.
Look at Arya. Look at the width of her face. I mean, her eyes are wide here because of what she's seeing. And then compare that to, and let me grab a good one. Here we will have, let's go back to screen share. Now look at Michelle Fairley.
Oh, yeah.
Eyes are wider.
Face is wider, too. Yeah, I can see that. How the hell did they do that?
I don't entirely know. It's one of the things I'm going to have to look at, but her face is definitely wider. And she looks more like Arya there than I think she ever has. And I apologize for those of you listening on the podcast for us having to navigate the visuals, but it's really significant because as we were talking about misconnections, remember Arya is right outside. Right. And then at this moment, right, you know, her mother looks more like her than she ever has.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just sort of hammering home the awfulness of what's going on because at that moment, Catelyn believes that her entire family is dead. Her husband, her son, her daughter-in-law. She has no idea what's happened to her daughters. She doesn't give a fuck about Jon Snow. Not hers anyway. And it's a brutal moment. And it's a very strange moment visually because I really think they want to hammer home the lost connection or the misconnection.
Well, and it's also, I mean, while we're going on the whole thing with the wolves as a potential medium for connection, at this moment, Arya is looking at the wolf.
Yes.
And there has always been, I mean, what happens to the wolf is different in the books. In the books, he's allowed to get out and, like, kill a bunch of Freys before he gets shot down. And there is this theory that Robb Stark, in the sort of death throes, has thrown his mind into his wolf. And as he's dying, might actually see Arya witnessing this. But
that would be even more brutal.
I think that's pushing it a bit far. But, you know, what I just wanted to pull out a few things before we get to what happens once the song starts playing. One thing is, in terms of, like, you know, nothing up my sleeve, the scene where Walder gets, like, really creepy at Talissa.
Yes.
You know, that is very much signposting. He directly says, or I don't know whether he does, he says, you shouldn't have brought her here if you want to hide her. And, you know, at the time you think, oh, he's just going to be really creepy to her. He's going to, you know, get his digs in at Robb for, you know, screwing over his daughters, and that's going to be it.
But this is a really important moment that goes back to Tyrion's wedding. What Tywin told Tyrion at the wedding, which is the whole point of this is for you to bear an heir. Like that's the only reason this wedding is happening. And once we get to this wedding, the Red Wedding, and he starts, Walder Frey starts talking about her breasts. He's noticing, I'm guessing, the engorgement that comes along with pregnancy.
And she's showing slightly.
Yes, and so there's a sense that connects this wedding to that one, in that if the whole point is to have an heir, and people have talked about the misogyny of this episode, and I understand why, but I think the violence against women in this episode is not necessarily excessive. It's in part and parcel of how craven Walder Frey is, because he notices specifically that she's pregnant, that she has an heir, that part of, and I'm guessing is looking at Robb as someone would look at Tywin and say, this is all part of a plan to have the heir, to have the throne. You ruined this for me, and that's why I think Talissa is one of the first to, and why she is attacked in the way she is. That
in the way that she is. The other thing that I'd like to kind of, two other moments that I want to kind of, or a couple of, let me just do some stuff on the feast. So, Roose Bolton, I gotta tip my hat to this guy's acting, because here is this cold, emotionless, almost Hannibal Lecter-ish character, and then he comes in and he's smiling, and even though he's not drinking, he's joking about, yeah, I married my fat wife and that made me very rich, and it's like, that should be another warning sign. Mr. No Smiley is smiling.
Yeah.
And then, the betting is,
again, to refer back to Tyrion's wedding.
Yeah.
Where there was no betting.
This is the inversion of Tyrion's wedding. It is also, in its own way, is like, okay, this is a misogynist culture. Here is a misogynist tradition. We're going to show it to you. We're going to sort of question its morality. We find out that Eddard Stark threatened to break the jaw of anyone who tried to strip his wife on their wedding night.
Which only reminds us of his nobility and sets him up as the sort of paradigmatic. But yeah.
And then there's the moment where, Robb and Talissa are, falling into each other's eyes, and they talk about naming the boy Eddard. And, okay, on one level, it's got to be a new record for Sean Bean that now a character named after him dies within 5 minutes. But it
dies in utero.
Yeah, like within 5 minutes of being named.
This is not even, Sean Bean doesn't even make it out of the womb this time.
Yeah. And, I've heard some people compare this to the bit in the McBain parodies from The Simpsons where the guy buys the SS Live Forever. But
I don't actually watch The Simpsons. I don't know, but okay, never mind. Go on.
Oh wow. Okay, shocking lack of knowledge. But it like, and it should have caught everyone. Everyone should have realized at that point. Like, once you start, planning for your idyllic future, that's the moment you're marked for death. But people are so wrapped up in the emotion of the moment that they suppress their own understanding of how the rules of these things work.
And absolutely, and in fact, I'll go over this a bit in a subsequent post. But all I can say is that that conversation between Robb and Talissa, it goes on forever, and all it does is go through a series of shot and reverse shot, and it's just endless. Okay, there are probably 16, is I think what I counted, shots and reverse shots in their conversation. Both of their heads are included entirely in the shot. It is not just the sort of conventional rom-com, I'm going to show these people kissing eventually, let's give you close-ups on their faces in a 2-shot, so you begin to associate them with each other. This is way over the top. This is something terrible is going to happen. This is the last time these two people are ever going to do this again, and it is, in fact. But it's completely excessive. The number of times that Nutter reverses from her to him in order to compound our impression of the strength of their marriage and the longevity of it for the next 35 seconds. It's an awful but sort of brilliant use of convention.
Yeah,
because all we see are those reverses, and we're thinking, yeah, this is love, this is great, and then
yeah. So let's talk about the song changing, because I really want to talk about the song changing.
Yes.
I mean, first of all, for anyone who is wondering why they took like a good 2 minutes to like explain the song to us last episode, and actually have it sung in its entirety in season 2, episode 9, this is why. Because in the same way that we would instantly recognize something being very, very wrong if we went to, a dive bar and there was classical piano music playing, it's instantly wrong that the Lannisters' victory song is being played at this wedding.
In fact,
it sounds great.
It does. The one sort of personal note I'll interject here, and that you get back to it, is that I had a playlist at my own wedding for all of the different songs that I wanted played, and I just sort of put my favorite songs on there. And the moment that one of my favorite songs, it's from Radiohead's OK Computer. It's called Let Down. And the moment that this song starts playing at my wedding reception, everyone stops and looks at me. Because everyone knew I made the playlist, and Let Down. This is the song you're playing on your wedding day at your reception.
That's kind of weird.
Yes, but this is the exact same sort of thing. The song is so inappropriate that how could people have not? And that's why I sort of made a little bit of an issue of Catelyn noticing right before the song starts. She has that recognition right before it starts. But once it does, everyone should know. Go on.
Yeah, and, we get that great shot of her pulling back Roose Bolton's sleeve. I don't know if you want to say anything about the visuals, but I love that detail. Well,
yeah, it's the moment of confirmation. And again, I wish I sort of had all of these terms sort of available, but I've forgotten all of my Greek that I never knew. But yes, this moment where she pulls back his sleeve, sees the armor underneath, that confirms her worst nightmare. And that's the moment when she stands up.
Yeah, right. And, to give her credit, given that a portion of the fandom has been very vocal about complaining about how Michelle Fairley's character has been, assassinated or betrayed her, etc. This is Catelyn Stark at her best, that the moment that she sees something is wrong, she hauls off and cold cocks one of the most dangerous men in the North. And, she is instantly in action. And then everything just goes to hell.
Well, because things don't go according to plan because she initiates. I mean, she was not supposed to notice these things. That's what makes it more tragic, is that if all had gone according to plan, well, I think Talissa still would have been stabbed first, because clearly Walder Frey wanted to have Robb see that, and David Nutter definitely hammers that home, the way he the way Robb, after being shot, crawls to her womb and puts his hand on it as if to staunch the bleeding before picking up her lifeless body. It's just.
It would have happened in any case, and the Walder stopping the music and giving that speech about how I haven't given you the hospitality you deserve, he's clearly setting up the impact. He's kind of, clapping his hands so that, the audience is focused where it should be. And I actually haven't thought until now about the way that the musicians up on the balcony are kind of like a theatrical audience themselves.
I know they certainly aren't. In fact, one of the things I'll be writing about is the way that, unlike Tyrion's wedding, where everyone was casting suspicious glances at everyone else, this time everyone was pretty much always looking in the right place. The only moment where we have glances going where they shouldn't be is when Walder's daughter, when the veil comes off, and Robb sees that she's attractive. We have this kind of give and take where Robb looks at Walder looks back, but that's the only time we have people looking where they're not supposed to be. And that, that band it's right where it's supposed to be, and it's doing its job. It's looking in the right direction.
Yes.
It's all kosher.
The only thing I want to say that's, Jane gets stabbed in the stomach, Robb stands up, he gets shot, then these sort of waves of arrows come in over the top, and then throats getting slit, and it's just a massacre, and then they cut away to the bit where the dog dies, and then they cut back to all of this. The only thing that's slightly different is, in the books, you know who these northern bannermen are. They are Robb's friends, they have these names, and they kind of have these moments of, kind of doomed heroism. The great Jon Umber is there, and he kills like 3 guys with his bare hands before they finally wrestle him down. His son, the small Jon, has this great moment where he picks up an entire goddamn table and uses it as a shield to protect Robb. And none of it works.
But the reason for that, and the reason for the cutting outside, is because we need Arya's reaction shot of the we need, and this is. And
in the books, these are 2 separate chapters, so they
exactly
they have to make this shift. All I'll say is that it makes one of my few complaints about the episode is that when the slaughter moves from the intimate to the
indiscriminate,
to the universal and indiscriminate, we don't have quite the same reaction to it. But at the same time, it makes it kind of worse. It's almost like the banality of evil thing. It's like, instead of these kind of moments of doomed heroism, and Robb doing this thing of, as he's being shot with arrows, he's trying to move towards Walder Frey. Instead, he's, almost from the moment he's shot, he's given up. Everything is about his dead wife in his arms, and it just makes it even worse.
I agree, and I really think that the imbricating of the chapters or interleaving of the chapters and making that reaction shot Arya's is all part of setting up Arya's plot line, that she needs to see these things, and we need to see her reaction, because that, as a sort of moral compass throughout the series, it's been Arya reacting to tragedy. And Arya realizing that if this is what's going on outside, what must be going on inside? And again, she decides to do something. Much like when she was on the Statue of Baelor. She decides, I'm going to do something, and there's a large man there to stop her.
Yes, an unlikely protector and ally.
And, in terms of the misogyny of the episode and, the thwonking of Arya on the head,
I will say I don't think that particular bit is particularly misogynist. And I don't think, if anything, it's better than it would have been in the books, because in the books he hits her in the back of the head with an axe.
Yeah.
And the reader is left thinking he's killed her. And given how the audience has reacted to this iteration of the Red Wedding, I don't think that they could have gotten away with killing Arya too. It would have been too much.
And I guess what I'll say more generally about the misogyny is simply that it's Walder Frey's. I don't think it belongs to the writers of the episodes. As someone noted on my Facebook page, one of the writers of this episode is a UCI MFA, and typical of them to be misogynist, which terrible. Don't say that about UCI. But I don't think that there was misogyny in this episode, except as it was represented in the culture, in the actions and desires of Walder Frey, who resembles no one so much as Craster in his treatment of his many, many daughters, some of whom don't have names.
The difference between Craster and Walder is money.
Yeah.
That's
and
it.
So I don't necessarily see this as an episode whose misogyny is so grievous that the show needs to be canceled, HBO needs to be kicked off the air, or any of the many other really stupid overreactions that I read over the week. It's just a terrible happening in a misogynist culture, and that's how you have to represent it. If I were making a modern day, sort of a similarly plotted narrative about modern day Saudi Arabia, it would end up being very misogynistic because Saudi society is very misogynistic. You can't get around that, and Game of Thrones actually is trying to, with characters like Arya and Dany. And
I would also say, because I've been watching, I don't know if you've been watching the Women in Video Games video series on YouTube. This is the opposite of most normal tropes about gendered violence, in that, the whole women in refrigerators thing is about violence as women used as character development for the main male character.
Yes, I don't think Robb Stark's character is developing very much more after.
Robb Stark is dead. The people that this is meant to influence is Catelyn, because this is her story. And
Arya.
And Arya. Is someone playing a tambourine?
My cat is scratching at his collar. Wow, you picked that up?
Yeah, I picked that up.
Hold on. Let me make him famous. Yes. Someone was, in fact, scratching something or other. Now, look, you're on the internet, buddy. Say hello. All right. And, that's not quite a tambourine, but frisky cat.
Yeah.
And on that note, I guess we probably, this is actually a really good image to end on. Look. Cute cat.
Put him in front of your face. Put him in front of your face.
Look at this cute cat.
Your face. There you go.
There we go. This cat is so cute. He's so cute. Look at
speaking of which, I can't wait for if I'm right about what the opening shot is of next week.
Well, put the money down. Put your money down.
Well, I don't want to spoil it. I mean, let's give a 5-second spoiler buffer, okay?
All right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opening shot of next week is Robb with his head cut off and the wolf's head sewn on top. Because that's too good an image not to hit you with in the face.
I bet you they're not going to do it just because of the ASPCA.
At this point they've killed how many dogs and
but it's different.
Horses?
It's different. Remember,
I will be genuinely table flipping angry with the producers if they blow the chance to. I mean, it's such a powerful image. It pops up everywhere in the books. People start seeing the dead king with the head of a wolf as early as A Clash of Kings. It's all over the place, and I think if it's shown, it will have the same visual impact that Sean Bean bending forward, his neck had for about 2 years.
I agree with you on its potential. I just I sort of doubt they're going to be able to get away with that. But on that happy note, we will say goodbye because YouTube's about to kill us anyway. So this has been another Lawyers, Guns, and Money podcast with Scott R. Kaufman and Stephen Attewell, and we will see you next week, and hopefully things will be happier.